The instant I stepped through the ballroom entrance, her voice reached my ears. Vivienne Caldecott, my brother's flawless bride-to-be, was tilted toward her bridesmaids, clutching a flute of champagne in her perfectly manicured fingers. Her whisper carried deliberately across the space, and I understood completely that she intended it that way. Oh, wonderful. The smelly farm girl decided to show up. Her companions cackled like a cluster of hyenas draped in couture gowns. Vivienne never even glanced in my direction when those words left her lips. I was that irrelevant to her. Just some humiliation that had crawled out of a backwater village to tarnish the elegance of her impeccable engagement celebration. What Vivienne failed to realize, what absolutely no one in that venue understood, was that I had placed my signature on the ownership papers of this establishment 3 years prior, the Sovereign Hotel. Every crystal fixture suspended above her coiffed head, every utensil she raised to her painted mouth, every square foot of imported stone beneath her ridiculously expensive stilettos belonged to me. And before this evening concluded, that careless whisper would strip away everything she had ever desired. My name is Marlena Ashford. I am 31 years of age, and I was raised in Havenbrook, Vermont, a community so minuscule that our only experience with gridlock occurred when elderly Mr. Pemberton's dairy cows broke loose and obstructed the main road for nearly 3 hours. I departed when I turned 18, and I genuinely never gazed backward. Not because I harbored resentment for my origins, but because my relatives made it abundantly evident there was no place for me among them. You see, I possess an older brother, Sterling, the treasured child, the son who existed beyond reproach. Throughout my formative years, every accomplishment I achieved was weighed against his, and I perpetually fell short. If I earned an A, Sterling had secured an A+. If I qualified for the softball roster, Sterling had served as team leader. My mother, Cordelia, possessed a particular manner of regarding me that conveyed I was merely a preliminary sketch, while Sterling represented the completed work of art. So I departed. I stuffed a single bag, boarded a bus bound for the city, and reconstructed my existence with nothing except $200 and an obstinate determination to succeed. Everyone back in Havenbrook assumed I was barely surviving. They imagined me cramped in some minuscule apartment surviving on cheap ramen, which held truth for my initial 2 years. But what remained hidden from them was that I secured employment as a housekeeper at an intimate luxury inn. And that position transformed my entire trajectory. I absorbed everything. I observed. I analyzed. I advanced from tidying rooms to manning the reception to serving as assistant director to becoming director. I preserved every cent, invested with precision, executed intelligent decisions, and embraced calculated risks when intuition guided me. By 28, I possessed my inaugural property. By 30, I controlled 3. Currently at 31, I operate Evergreen Hospitality, an enterprise that commands 6 boutique establishments spanning the eastern seaboard. The Sovereign stands as my crown jewel, my deepest source of satisfaction. But here lies the reality about constructing something from absolutely nothing. You discover the value of silence. You recognize that people diminish your worth, and occasionally that becomes your most formidable advantage. So I maintained my secret from my relatives. They never inquired regardless. To their perception, I remained the floundering younger sister who could never match Sterling and his middling supervisory position at an insurance corporation. The paradox was so pronounced you could practically taste it. This evening, I received a summons to Sterling's engagement celebration. Delivered at the final moment, naturally, presumably my mother's notion, an obligation invitation allowing her to inform her acquaintances that the complete family attended. I nearly declined, yet something compelled me forward. Perhaps inquisitiveness. Perhaps some persistent optimistic fragment believing circumstances had evolved. They had not. I positioned myself at the threshold of my own establishment, attired in denim and my cherished boots, my hair retaining subtle traces of the countryside because I had navigated through Havenbrook during my journey, simply to anchor myself to my beginnings. My ensemble likely exceeded the combined value of everything Vivienne displayed, but appearances would never betray this. That represents the nature of authentic affluence. It requires no announcement. And truthfully, you can extract the girl from agricultural land, but you cannot extract the agricultural essence from the girl. Although you can certainly extract that farm girl's earnings directly to financial institutions. I identified my mother across the venue, commanding attention among her social circle, presumably extolling Sterling's magnificent fiancé and their magnificent destiny together. Sterling occupied space beside Vivienne, appearing like a gentleman who had secured extraordinary fortune. He remained oblivious that he clutched a worthless ticket. Vivienne ultimately directed her attention toward me, her expression cutting as a blade's edge. She failed to identify me as anything beyond an irritation, a blemish on her pristine evening. That suited me perfectly. Let her perceive me as insignificant. Let every person present believe it. I had discovered long ago that the most satisfying retribution operates quietly. It exercises patience. It observes silently. It watches individuals excavate their own demise, while they remain too preoccupied with condescension to recognize the implement in their grasp. So I returned her smile, proceeded to the beverage station, and requested a drink. My personnel understood to maintain discretion regarding my identity. Donovan Mercer, my operations director, captured my attention from the opposite end of the space and delivered an understated acknowledgement. Everything functioned seamlessly. Everything appeared ideal for the present, because approximately 3 hours hence, Vivienne Caldecott would receive an invaluable education. Never dismiss the farm girl, particularly when she commands the territory supporting your feet. Before we proceed, if this narrative resonates with you, please engage that subscribe function and share in the comments your location and current hour. I review every single response, and it holds tremendous significance for me. Thank you immensely for your encouragement. Now, returning to our tale. The engagement celebration matched precisely what someone like Vivienne would orchestrate. Lavish, excessive, engineered to dazzle individuals already dazzled by themselves. Ice formations crafted into elegant waterfowl-occupied spaces, a champagne cascade that appeared gratuitous even by champagne cascade benchmarks, and sufficient blooms to provoke envy from botanical institutions. My hotel personnel had executed magnificently, which generated pride within me, despite my urge to dismiss every aesthetic selection Vivienne had imposed. I collected my beverage and located a secluded position for surveillance. That moment brought my mother to me. Cordelia Ashford advanced like a woman detecting an offensive odor and attempting to pinpoint its origin. She examined me thoroughly, her gaze halting at my footwear with unmistakable displeasure. She remarked that it was pleasant I managed to attend, her inflection suggesting it was anything except pleasant. Then she questioned why I could not have selected something more suitable, noting that Vivienne's relatives were exceptionally cultured. She emphasized cultured, as though it represented vocabulary requiring my attention. I explained I arrived directly from employment and lacked opportunity to change attire, which contained truth. I simply neglected mentioning that employment signified directing a hospitality empire valued at multiple millions. My mother exhaled the manner she perpetually exhaled at me, like I represented a continuous letdown she had resigned herself to enduring. She instructed me to at minimum attempt creating a favorable impression on the Caldecotts, then vanished into the gathering to resume her social responsibilities. And there, it materialized. 20 seconds of exchange, and I already experienced regression to 12 years of age, failing to satisfy some imperceptible criterion never communicated to me. I observed Vivienne across the venue, distributing superficial embraces throughout a cluster of attendees. The woman had contacted more faces tonight than a campaigner at a regional gathering. Every motion was deliberate, every grin calibrated for optimal impact. Her parents, Bartlett and Genevieve Caldecott, maintained proximity like satisfied peacocks, observing their prized offspring navigate the room. Bartlett presented as an imposing gentleman with a flushed complexion and the variety of assurance that emerges from either authentic achievement or exceptional performance. Genevieve appeared slender, refined, adorned with ornaments that captured illumination with each movement she made. They projected wealth. They performed wealth, but something regarding them registered incorrectly, like an exquisite artwork mounted at an imperfect angle. I could not identify the issue yet, but I intended to discover it. Sterling ultimately noticed my presence and approached. My elder sibling, 3 years my senior, still regarding me like I was his bothersome younger sister who trailed him during childhood. He expressed pleasure that I attended, though his delivery indicated he had not registered whether I was present or absent. He inquired if I had encountered Vivian yet, and declared she was extraordinary. I acknowledged I had observed her. I retained my assessments privately. Sterling nodded, already scanning beyond me to identify others requiring his greeting. Certain patterns persist unchanged. Then he verbalized something that constricted my core. He mentioned that Mother had bestowed Grandmother's pendant to Vivian as an engagement offering. He asked if that was not remarkably generous of her. He noted that Vivian absolutely cherished it. I sensed oxygen abandoning my chest. Grandmother's pendant, the heirloom jewelry our grandmother had specifically designated for me prior to her passing. She had clasped my hand and stated it belonged to me because I was her visionary, her warrior, the one destined for remarkable accomplishments. My mother possessed this knowledge. She had occupied that chamber when Grandmother verbalized it, and she surrendered it to Vivian regardless. I directed my gaze across the venue and detected it. There it hung, adorning Vivian's neck as though it rightfully belonged there. My grandmother's pendant, my inheritance, my cherished memory, glittering beneath the chandelier glow while Vivian laughed at someone's comment. The disc jockey amplified the audio so intensely I could perceive my dental work resonating. If I desired my teeth disturbed, I would have simply scheduled a dental appointment. At minimum, there I would receive complimentary oral care supplies from the experience. I excused myself from Sterling and navigated toward the facilities, requiring a moment for composure. That instance brought me past Bartlett Caldecott in the corridor, his device pressed against his ear, his features taut with anxiety. He remained unaware of my presence. He focused entirely on his discussion. I detected him stating they required this union to proceed, that the Ashford family possessed sufficient resources to address their circumstances. He paused, attending to whoever occupied the other end. Then he stated they simply needed to complete the ceremony, and subsequently, everything would resolve itself. He terminated the call and returned toward the celebration, his practiced grin sliding back into position like a disguise. I remained motionless in that passage, my grandmother's pendant momentarily forgotten, supplanted by something considerably more pressing. The Ashford family possessed resources. What resources? My parents maintained a respectable residence, certainly, but I possessed definitive knowledge there existed a secondary mortgage because I had been covertly eliminating it for the preceding 4 years. Sterling earned a reasonable salary. Nothing exceptional. No family treasury existed. So why did Bartlett Caldecott believe otherwise? And more significantly, what precisely was their circumstance requiring resolution? I dedicated the subsequent hour monitoring the Caldecotts like a predator surveilling prey. Every grin, every hand clasp, every precisely timed chuckle. Now possessing awareness that something was amiss, I could perceive the fractures in their presentation. Bartlett continuously examined his device, his jaw tensing with each message he absorbed. Genevieve's adornments appeared impressive, but I detected she persistently touched them nervously, as though fearing they might vanish. And Vivian, gorgeous, flawless Vivian, harbored an appetite in her eyes that contained nothing regarding affection and everything regarding desperation. I commenced assembling the fragments. The Caldecotts believed my family possessed wealth, but why? Then comprehension arrived. For the preceding 4 years, I had been transmitting funds to my parents anonymously through my enterprise, Evergreen Hospitality. Every month, a payment would materialize to address the mortgage, the utility expenses, the healthcare costs. When my father underwent his knee procedure, I never attached my identity. I sought neither their appreciation nor their inquiries. I simply desired to assist from a distance. But my parents remained ignorant it originated from me. And evidently, my mother had concluded it must be Sterling. Naturally, she did. Within her perception, her treasured child was secretly providing for them, being the accountable, accomplished son she always recognized him to be. I could practically detect her boasting to her companions about Sterling's generosity, how he perpetually cared for his family. The funds I transmitted, the sacrifices I executed, and Sterling received the acknowledgement. The irony was so concentrated it could have entered the celebration and requested its own beverage. So the Caldecotts conducted their investigation. They observed a respectable residence with no apparent mortgage obligations. They detected Cordelia boasting about her son's investments. They observed a family that appeared to possess concealed prosperity. And they targeted Sterling like predators detecting vulnerability. But here exists the complication with their scheme. The funds did not belong to Sterling. No family fortune existed. The Caldecotts pursued an illusion. And when they uncovered the reality, my relatives would be abandoned with nothing except the consequences unless someone intervened. I located Donovan Mercer near the service entrance, documentation in hand, supervising the catering personnel. He raised his attention when I neared, his professional demeanor transitioning to authentic warmth when he recognized me. He quietly inquired if everything was satisfactory, addressing me as Ms. Ashford before I delivered a pointed look. He corrected himself and simply used Marlena. I informed him I required assistance. I needed comprehensive information regarding the Caldecott family. Anything he could uncover, commercial records, press coverage, whatever existed publicly. Donovan refrained from questioning why. That quality I valued about him. He simply acknowledged and stated he would investigate. He departed with his device already active. I returned to the celebration attempting to maintain normalcy, which grew increasingly challenging. That moment brought Vivian to me. She materialized beside me like a couture-dressed apparition, her expression so saccharine it could induce dental complications. She proposed we should converse, just the two of us, to become acquainted. She positioned her hand on my arm as though we shared long-standing friendship. I permitted her to guide me toward a secluded area near the facilities. The instant we moved beyond earshot of other attendees, her pleasant expression evaporated as though it never existed. She informed me she possessed knowledge about me. She stated she knew I transmitted funds homeward monthly, performing the dutiful daughter from a distance. But here existed what puzzled her. She questioned why someone who could scarcely afford their own lodging would transmit resources to relatives who did not even appreciate them. I sensed my jaw tighten, but maintained neutral features. She continued. Unless, she suggested, I was attempting to purchase their affection, attempting to demonstrate I possessed value. Pitiful, truly, she informed me. She drew closer and stated I should understand that Sterling had disclosed everything. How I perpetually envied him. How I could not accept not being the preferred child. How the family merely tolerated me from sympathy. She smiled again. But this iteration was cutting and vicious. She declared she would marry Sterling, integrate into this family, and honestly, she considered it preferable for everyone if I simply maintained distance. She stated nobody would notice my absence. She labeled me unnecessary burden, then patted my arm as though consoling a youth and departed. I remained there momentarily, processing what had transpired. Vivian believed I was impoverished. She believed the resources originated from Sterling. She possessed no awareness of my actual identity. It resembled observing someone boast about how remarkable their temporary vehicle is to the individual who possesses the entire automotive enterprise. Honestly, if self-importance consumed calories, Vivian Caldecott would be imperceptible. Donovan materialized at my side, startling me from my contemplation. He presented me a folder and stated I needed to review this. His complexion appeared drained, his customary composure disrupted. He stated the Caldecotts were not merely indebted. They were under investigation for fraudulent activities. I opened the folder immediately in that corridor, examining the documents contained within. Financial documentation, judicial filings, press coverage. The more I absorbed, the more unsettled I became. The Caldecotts were not who they presented themselves to be. Their property empire was a fragile construction founded on deception and others' resources. They were 6 months from insolvency and federal inquiry. This union was not about affection. It was an escape strategy. I transported the folder to my vehicle in the parking structure, requiring solitude to absorb what I was reviewing. The overhead illumination flickered as though equally astonished as I was. The documentation depicted a disturbing portrait. Bartlett and Genevieve Caldecott, had been operating what essentially constituted a pyramid scheme for years. They gathered funds from investors for property developments that either did not exist or were enormously inflated in value. Initial investors received compensation with funds from subsequent investors, the traditional deception. But the fragile structure was ultimately disintegrating. Investors were raising concerns. Auditors were approaching. Federal investigators had initiated a case. The Caldecotts required an exit approach and rapidly. Enter my brother Sterling. I could perceive their reasoning, distorted as it was. Identify a family appearing to possess resources. Marry into it. Utilize the association to reinforce their deteriorating standing, or at minimum possess refuge when everything collapsed. They presumably intended to deplete whatever assets my family held before vanishing to restart the deception elsewhere. What they failed to comprehend was that my family possessed nothing. The residence was mortgaged. Sterling's earnings were ordinary. The sole funds flowing into the Ashford household originated from me, and I could terminate that with a single communication. The Caldecotts were about to discover they had targeted the incorrect family, and when they did, they would abandon Sterling faster than a vessel taking water, leaving my brother devastated and my parents humiliated. Part of me desired to permit it to occur. Let them all endure the repercussions of their decisions. My mother, who surrendered my inheritance without hesitation. My brother, who never once defended me. Let them experience what it feels like to be discarded, disregarded, pushed aside. But I could not execute it. As much as they had wounded me, they remained my relatives. Sterling remained the boy who instructed me on bicycle riding, even if he had forgotten that somewhere during the intervening years. My mother remained the woman who remained awake throughout the night when I suffered childhood illness, even if she subsequently determined I was not worth acknowledging. Family is intricate. You can cherish people and be enraged with them simultaneously. You can desire to shield them even when they do not merit it. So I reached a resolution. I would expose the Caldecotts. I would rescue my family from a catastrophe they remained unaware was approaching, and I would execute it according to my methods. I contacted my attorney first. Prudence Whitlock responded on the second ring despite the hour being 8:01 in the evening, which justified what I compensated her. I provided her an overview of the situation and inquired how rapidly she could confirm the information in the folder. She stated she would have verification within the hour. Subsequently, I contacted Celeste Harrington, a financial investigator I had collaborated with on a complicated acquisition 2 years prior. Celeste was a genius with fiscal records, the variety of person who could examine a spreadsheet and identify what someone consumed for their morning meal. I transmitted photographs of the essential documents and requested she investigate further. If you are appreciating this narrative thus far, please take merely one moment to provide a like and share a comment. It genuinely assists me in continuing to create these stories for you, and I authentically value every single one of you. Thank you from the depths of my heart. Now, let us return to Marlena. Celeste contacted me in 40 minutes. Her voice was tense with the enthusiasm of someone who had discovered something significant. She informed me I was correct. They were operating a pyramid scheme, textbook methodology. But here is the fascinating element. She stated she had researched the Caldecott name in other states and discovered something in Nevada from 3 years past. Identical pattern, identical scheme, different identities. She stated the bride's authentic name was not Vivian. She asked if I was prepared for this. I stated I was prepared. Celeste informed me the bride's authentic name was Tabitha Morgan. She stated the parents were not even her genuine parents. They were collaborators in an extended deception, and they had been executing this for at minimum a decade. Different identities, different targets, identical scheme. I sat in my vehicle, the folder in my lap, and commenced laughing. I could not restrain it. These individuals possessed more identities than a cinema actress possesses former spouses. Tabitha, Vivian, presumably planning to be Victoria next year. My device buzzed with a message from Sterling. I examined it for an extended moment before accessing it. He wanted to know if we could converse. He mentioned something about Vivian felt incorrect. The manner Bartlett continued disappearing. The manner Vivian deflected every inquiry about her history. He stated perhaps he was being overly suspicious. I stared at the message for an extended period. Part of me wanted to respond, to instruct him to trust his instincts, to alert him about what was approaching. But what would that accomplish? He had 34 years to trust me, to include me, to treat me like family. He chose otherwise. Besides, if I cautioned him now, he might caution Vivian, and I could not accept that risk. I composed a simple response. I informed him we would converse after the toast, and to simply wait. 8:56. Bartlett Caldecott was adjusting his necktie near the modest stage where the disc jockey had established equipment. He appeared confident again, his practiced demeanor firmly established. He remained ignorant of what was about to transpire. I contemplated what Vivian had stated to me earlier, how I was unnecessary burden, how nobody would notice my absence, how I should simply maintain distance. The interesting aspect about individuals who underestimate you is that they never observe you approaching. They are so occupied looking downward that they miss the moment you ascend. 8:59. Bartlett stepped onto the platform and grasped the microphone. The disc jockey reduced the volume. Attendees turned to face him, champagne vessels in hand, prepared to toast the joyful couple. I established eye contact with Donovan across the venue. He delivered an almost imperceptible acknowledgement. The displays behind the stage illuminated, currently exhibiting a presentation of Sterling and Vivian's photographs. Joyful couple at a dining establishment. Joyful couple at the shoreline. Joyful couple living their joyful deception. Not for much longer. Bartlett cleared his throat and commenced speaking. He stated good evening to everyone and expressed gratitude for their presence to celebrate this wonderful union. He stated when his daughter initially brought Sterling home, he recognized immediately that this young gentleman was exceptional. I nearly laughed. His daughter. The daughter who was not his daughter. The daughter whose authentic name he presumably had to remind himself of every morning. Bartlett continued discussing family, about heritage, about how honored the Caldecotts were to unite with the Ashford family. He discussed promising futures and grandchildren and constructing something enduring together. Every statement was a deception, and every deception was about to be revealed. Bartlett elevated his glass. He stated to the joyful couple, to affection, to family, to eternity. I retrieved my device and transmitted Donovan a single word. Now. The displays flickered. For a moment, everyone presumably thought it was a technical malfunction. The joyful photographs of Sterling and Vivian vanished, replaced by something else entirely. A document, official appearing, stamped with judicial seals and legal terminology. Bartlett's grin froze on his features. The document was a court filing from Nevada dated 3 years prior, a fraud investigation. And there, listed as an individual of interest, was a name nobody in this venue had heard previously. Tabitha Morgan. A murmur rippled through the gathering. Individuals squinted at the displays, attempting to comprehend what they were observing. Bartlett fumbled with the microphone, his complexion transitioning from flushed to pallid in seconds. He stated there must be some error, and called it a technical malfunction. He turned toward the audiovisual booth and shouted for someone to repair it, but the displays continued changing. Another document materialized. Financial records demonstrating investor funds being channeled into shell corporations. Then another, press coverage about a property scheme in Reno that had cost dozens of families their lifetime savings. Then photographs, a younger Tabitha Morgan, different hair coloring, identical cold eyes, positioned next to Bartlett and Genevieve at some charitable function under completely different names. Vivian stood motionless in the center of the dance area, her champagne vessel trembling in her grasp. For the initial time all evening, her disguise had slipped entirely. She appeared terrified. Sterling stared at the displays, then at Vivian, then back at the displays. I could observe his mind functioning, fragments connecting together, the doubt he had experienced all evening suddenly making horrific sense. Bartlett attempted to push through the gathering toward the exit, but 2 of my security personnel stepped into his path. Genevieve grasped his arm, whispering frantically, but there was nowhere to escape. That moment brought me forward. I walked through the parting crowd toward the platform, my boots clicking on the stone floor. Every eye in the venue turned to me. The farm girl, The nobody, the unnecessary burden. Donovan's voice came over the speakers, calm and professional. He stated, "Ladies and gentlemen, he would like to introduce the proprietor of the Sovereign Hotel and chief executive of Evergreen Hospitality." He stated, "Please welcome Miss Marlena Ashford." The silence that followed was overwhelming. My mother's complexion went white. Sterling's jaw actually dropped open. Even Vivian, amid her panic, appeared genuinely astonished. I accepted the microphone from Bartlett's limp hand. I stated good evening to everyone. I apologized for the interruption, but I thought they might desire to know who they were actually celebrating tonight. I gestured to the displays behind me. I stated Bartlett and Genevieve Caldecott were not who they presented themselves to be. Their property empire was a fraud. Their prosperity was stolen from innocent investors. And their daughter Vivienne was actually named Tabitha Morgan, a deception artist who had been operating the identical scheme for over a decade. Vivienne finally recovered her voice. She screamed that I was fabricating and called me an envious, pitiful nobody. She stated I was inventing this because I could not tolerate seeing Sterling content. I smiled at her. I stated that was interesting. And I questioned if I also invented the federal investigation that had been pursuing them for 2 years. I mentioned the arrest warrants that were issued last month in Nevada and expressed curiosity how I could have fabricated the fact that Agent Miranda Beckett and her team were currently waiting outside this establishment. As if on cue, the ballroom doors opened. 4 individuals in formal attire entered, credentials visible, expressions entirely professional. Vivian's expression crumbled. Bartlett attempted to flee. He managed approximately 10 feet before Agent Beckett intercepted him with a calm but firm hand on his shoulder. She informed him that Bartlett Caldecott, or whatever his authentic name was under arrest for wire fraud, investment fraud, and conspiracy. Genevieve commenced weeping, cosmetics streaming down her meticulously prepared face. She continued stating there was a mistake, that they could clarify everything, that it was not what it appeared. Vivian, Tabitha, whatever her name was, turned to Sterling one final time. Her voice was desperate, imploring. She questioned if he was actually going to permit his sister to do this to them. She stated they loved each other, and that he had to believe her. Sterling regarded her for an extended moment. I could observe the conflict occurring behind his eyes. The woman he thought he loved, versus the evidence he could not deny. Then he executed something I never anticipated. He stepped away from her. He stated he did not even know who she was. His voice was quiet, broken, but certain. He stated he did not know who any of them were. Vivian's expression shifted from desperation to fury instantly. She lunged toward me, screaming that I had destroyed everything, that I was supposed to be nobody, that I was just the smelly farm girl. Security apprehended her before she reached me. I leaned close enough for only her to hear. I stated this smelly farm girl possessed the venue she was standing in, compensated the salary of everyone who was about to escort her out, and would sleep very soundly tonight knowing exactly who she was. They guided her away, still screaming, her designer gown wrinkled, her perfect hair destroyed, her entire carefully constructed existence falling apart with every step. I turned back to the stunned gathering, most of whom were still attempting to process what had transpired. I stated, well, the catering was already compensated for, and it seemed like a waste to discard good food. I informed them the beverage station would remain operational for anyone who wanted to remain. Nervous laughter rippled through the venue. The disc jockey, bless his heart, commenced playing something upbeat. The engagement celebration was over, but the evening was just commencing. The subsequent hour felt like something from a delirious vision. The Caldecotts, all 3 of them, were escorted out in restraints while the remaining attendees observed in stunned silence. Vivian or Tabitha or whoever she would be in her subsequent existence was still screaming threats as they placed her in the back of an unmarked vehicle. Something about attorneys, litigation, vengeance, empty statements from an empty individual. She went from future Mrs. Ashford to future prison resident in under 15 minutes. That had to be some variety of record, even for a professional deception artist. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted from shock to something else. Curiosity, perhaps intrigue. A few attendees were already on their devices, presumably sharing what had just occurred with everyone they knew. By morning, this narrative would be everywhere. Sterling found me near the beverage station. He appeared like a gentleman who had just awakened from a nightmare, only to realize he was still dreaming. His eyes were red, his hands unsteady, his entire worldview clearly shattered. He questioned how I knew. His voice cracked on the words. He questioned how I figured it out. I informed him I listened. I stated I observed. I paid attention. All the things I had been doing my entire existence while everyone else ignored me. He was silent for a moment. Then he stated he was sorry. He stated he understood that did not address it, that it did not address years of treating me like an afterthought. But he was sorry. I examined my brother's face, searching for the deception, the angle, but all I observed was genuine remorse. Perhaps for the initial time ever, I informed him sorry was a beginning. We stood there in silence. Two siblings who had spent decades as strangers, finally perceiving each other clearly. Then my mother appeared. Cordelia Ashford appeared smaller somehow, like the events of the evening had physically diminished her. She approached slowly, uncertainly, none of her customary confidence on display. She commenced stating she did not know, but I interrupted her. I retrieved my device and showed her the screen. Financial records, transfer receipts, 4 years of payments to her mortgage company, her utility providers, her medical expenses, all from Evergreen Hospitality, all from me. I informed her she thought Sterling was supporting them. I stated she boasted to everyone about her generous, successful son. I let that linger in the atmosphere for a moment, before I stated it was me. It was always me. My mother stared at the device, then at me, then back at the device. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged. I stated I did not do it for appreciation. I stated I did it because they were my relatives, even when they made me feel like I was not theirs. But I thought she should understand the truth about who was actually present for her. Cordelia's eyes filled with tears. Not the dramatic, performative tears I had witnessed her employ at family gatherings, genuine ones, the variety that emerged from somewhere deep. She whispered my name, Marlena, like she was saying it for the initial time. Before I could respond, there was commotion near the dance area. I turned to observe Vivian's grandmother's pendant, my grandmother's pendant, lying on the ground where Vivian had thrown it during her meltdown. Sterling walked over and retrieved it carefully, like it might shatter. He examined it for an extended moment, then walked back to me. He stated this was always supposed to be mine. His voice was thick with emotion. He stated he did not know Mother surrendered it, and he was sorry. He placed the pendant in my hand. The weight of it felt right, like something that had been missing for years was finally back where it belonged. My mother observed the exchange with tears streaming down her face. She stated she had been so wrong about everything. I did not disagree with her, but I did not compound it either. There would be time for difficult conversations later. Right now, I was simply exhausted. An attendee wandered over and inquired if the celebration was still occurring, appearing confused, but hopeful. I examined the venue. The ice formations were melting. The champagne cascade was still flowing. Half the attendees had departed, but the other half seemed determined to get their value from the open beverage station. I shrugged and signaled the disc jockey to continue playing. Might as well. The evening had already been sufficiently strange. What was a little dancing going to hurt? 3 weeks later, I sat in my office at the Sovereign Hotel, looking out at the city skyline. The morning sun was streaming through the windows, and for the initial time in years, I felt at peace. The Caldicots were finished. Federal prosecutors had sufficient evidence to charge them with multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Tabitha Morgan, the woman who had labeled me a smelly farm girl, was in custody, awaiting trial. Her bail had been set high enough that even her fake wealthy parents could not afford it. Turns out when you spend decades stealing from people, you do not have many friends willing to help when things go wrong. The story made local news for about a week. Hotel mogul exposes deception artists at family engagement celebration. One headline even called me the smelly farm girl who possessed the venue. I had that one framed. It hangs in my office now, right where I can see it every morning. Sterling came to visit me at the establishment yesterday. It was the initial time he had seen my office, my personnel, the existence I had constructed without anyone's assistance. He walked around touching things like he could not quite believe they were real. He stated he had spent years thinking he knew who I was. He stated he was wrong about everything. I informed him we both had a lot of years to make up for. I stated maybe we should start now. We went to lunch, a genuine lunch, not a family obligation where we made small talk and avoided anything meaningful. We actually talked about our childhood, about our parents, about all the things we never said to each other. It was not perfect, and it was not easy, but it was honest. That was more than we had ever had before. My mother started therapy last week. She contacted to inform me, her voice small and uncertain, so different from the woman who used to make me feel like a constant disappointment. She stated she wanted to understand why she had treated me the way she did. She stated she wanted to be better. I informed her I appreciated that. I stated we could take things slow, and we would. Rebuilding trust requires time, but at least we were finally constructing something instead of watching it disintegrate. This morning I was hosting a business breakfast in the establishment restaurant. Investors, partners, individuals who wanted to discuss expansion opportunities, standard activities for a standard day. A young woman walked in appearing nervous. She was wearing simple attire, her hair pulled back in a practical arrangement, her eyes wide as she absorbed the elegant surroundings, clearly out of her element. One of my investors, a gentleman named Reginald, who possessed too much wealth and not enough manners, made a comment loud enough for everyone to hear. He questioned who permitted her entry, and stated this was a private gathering. I stood up from the table. I walked over to the young woman and extended my hand. I stated her name warmly, calling her Rosalind, and stated I was so pleased she could attend. I stated everyone. I wanted them to meet Rosalind Templeton, this year's recipient of the Evergreen Hospitality Scholarship. I informed them she grew up in a small town in Kansas, worked 2 positions to put herself through community college, and was about to start at Columbia's hospitality management program in the fall. The venue went quiet. Reginald suddenly found his coffee very interesting. I guided Rosalind to a seat at my table, the identical table as the investors, the identical table as the individuals who thought they were superior to her because of their wealth and their connections. She whispered gratitude to me, appearing overwhelmed. I informed her not to thank me yet. I stated the genuine work was just commencing. But I informed her if she ever felt like she did not belong somewhere, to remember that the individuals who constructed the most beautiful things usually started with nothing but stubbornness and dreams. She smiled at that. After the breakfast, I stood in the lobby of my establishment observing guests come and go. Business individuals, tourists, families, all of them walking on floors I possessed, sleeping in beds I compensated for, completely unaware of the woman who made it all possible. And that was fine. I did not need them to know. Individuals will always try to make you feel small for where you came from. Let them. While they are busy looking down on you, they will not see you rising up. I learned that lesson a long time ago, back in a small town where I was never good enough, never pretty enough, never enough of anything. I carried it with me through years of struggle and doubt, and people telling me I would never amount to anything. And now here I was, standing in my establishment, surrounded by everything I constructed. The smelly farm girl. She smelled success coming from a mile away.